Hello again, listeners and readers at Pixel Judge. We are excited to have you with us today. I know we have two especially big Nexus, the Jupiter Incident fans in our staff, Bismarck and Neon, so they'll definitely be looking forward to this. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with the producer of Nexus 1 and hopefully 2, Vincent van Diemen. Welcome, Vincent.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Thank you for taking time out of your day to talk to us. So, for starters, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your team? On your Kickstarter page, it says that it's made by HD Interactive and Most Wanted Entertainment. Was there a merging of companies there?
Okay, so let me explain to you how this went. HD Interactive. I used to work with HD Interactive together with Mike Horneman. We set this up. It was a publishing company, small Dutch independent publishing company, and we were the official publisher of the first part of Nexus. Nexus was developed by Mythos, a Hungarian studio based in Budapest, but unfortunately Mythos went into bankruptcy. Not exactly sure when that was, but I think it was around 2005, sorry. So actually not that long after Nexus was released. What we did at the time, because we were doing another studio, HD was doing another studio with Mythos, Mike and I, we went to Budapest and we founded Most Wanted Entertainment. And we managed to hire most of the people working at Mythos at the time, and it's basically how Most Wanted Entertainment saw the daylight. So HD Interactive is still around, but not so much as a publisher anymore, but it's the mother company basically of Most Wanted Entertainment. So currently I'm sort of independent. I'm not working for HD, but the deal with Mike is that should we get the game funded, that he will hire me back as the producer for Nexus 2. This is our story in a nutshell.
So then could you explain, for those who don't know it, your previous game, Nexus the Jupiter Incident, and then from there, what drove you to develop a sequel to the game? Were you unhappy with the lack of in-depth sci-fi strategy games in the market?
The way that we got involved in this game was actually quite interesting, I think. We got to know the people from Mythos, and in particular I got to know Zsolt Tatrai, who is now the studio manager of Most Wanted, and he used to be business development manager for Mythos at the time. I got to know him quite well from international fairs and shows, and I always, I was always very curious about Nexus, because as you say, there is not a lot of, space games, and especially not a lot of space games that have, a good depth of gameplay and a good story, all that stuff together. So I'd always been very interested in this project, but at the time, it was signed by German publisher CDV. And CDV had one or two very great hits, and they made a lot of money with that, and then they started basically buying all sorts of products. But in the end, they did not really have the capacity, and also there were some troubles between Mythos and CDV during the development of the game, and that was in particular because CDV wanted the game to basically head in a different direction as what the original design was. CDV wanted to attach a license to Nexus at the time. Of course, it wasn't called Nexus at the time, but the game we know as Nexus, called Imperia Galactica 3. So they bought that license, but I'm not sure if you are familiar with Imperium Galactica, but that's an interesting space game series, but it's really like from the 4X genre. So it's completely different from what the the original design of Nexus was. So basically, what happened was that CDV forced the new direction upon Mythos, and there were troubles, and the project was on hold for a few times, and in the end it took so long that the actual license for Imperium Galactica expired, so they had to rename the game again. Let me see if I can remember what that was. Was it Project Andromeda or something like that? I'm not quite sure, but so there were a lot of troubles. So I always said to Zsolt at the time, said, "Oh, okay, forget about CDV and sign the product with us with HD," which is of course not possible. But at some point, CDV decided that they would no longer continue this product. They wrote off a lot of the products that they had in development of the time, and Nexus was one of them. And the first thing Zsolt did was he got on the telephone. He called me. And well, that's how we ended up working together. So one of the first things that I did when I went there, and after we had, agreed on all the business details, sit down with all the lead people of the team, one by one, and also in bigger meetings, and taking a final decision on the direction of the game. It had already been in development for quite some time, so there were a lot of assets were already ready, and it was time to sort of make the final pick of the right direction, and then move on. And so basically that's what we did, and the decision was to more or less return to the original concept that the developers of Mythos and especially the designers had in mind. And basically that's how we got involved and how Nexus was developed.
The original Nexus game allowed the player to take part in epic space battles with a focus on tactical and strategic thinking. So to succeed in Nexus, one had to plan ahead, seize the moment, and know his own ship inside and out. How will Nexus 2 play? Will you add to the already substantial combat detail, or do you think you're going to stay closer to the previous formula?
I think that there's a lot of gameplay elements that make Nexus unique as a game. And obviously, since we want to make Nexus 2, we don't want to move away too far from that. Mostly we want the players to have the same gameplay experience with Nexus 2. There are, of course, some flaws in the original game that we want to improve on for Nexus 2. And one of the problems that people had in Nexus 1 was, like you mentioned, you need to know your ship inside out, then take them to battle. And once you're in battle, you better be sure that whatever you have, you bring to the battle is sufficient, to reach the end goals of that particular mission. Now sometimes that was a bit a trial and error, which for obvious reasons is not the best. So what I can say is what we want to improve there is to give the player better information at the start of each mission. Between missions, you have the dialogue, you have the diary notes of Marcus Cromwell. We will have a similar system, but we will also improve on the information that the player will have for the next mission, so that you're better prepared to start the next mission. But like in a general gameplay, there will not be a huge difference between Nexus 1 and Nexus 2.
So when playing some of the game series, I think one really did feel as if they were actually captain of a ship and commander of a fleet, and it was terrific. So you started to really identify yourself with the crew and the environment. How do you plan on emulating this feeling in Nexus 2?
Well, I think that what you are describing is part of the gameplay experience that is, again, quite unique for Nexus, because it is really an experience. I think that we've done a pretty good job at telling an interesting story. We've created an interesting universe, and we were able to get good voice actors, which are all basically contributing to the overall atmosphere of the game. And I think that's very important. The music, of course, but and all the visuals, the whole thing together made it this very special experience. So we're gonna basically travel the same road. I've even been in contact already with the localization agency in London that we've used for Nexus 1, and informed about the actors. And for instance, Marcus Cromwell is still available, and some of the other of the cast are as well. So we just have to make sure that we're creating, again, a good story. We will make sure that the universe is still intact, and that it's and that it fits with the first Nexus. We just have to recreate the same atmosphere and experience. So that's how we hope to achieve that.
I heard you mention Marcus Cromwell, so he is going to make a reappearance, and what do you have planned for the story this time around?
But the story basically picks up 25 years after the end of Nexus 1, where Angel and Marcus Cromwell basically, part ways. And obviously it was it was never clear what happened to Angel. She was an AI, very elusive. Did she in fact disappear, like into nowhere, or what? It's not clear, of course, from the ending of the first game. Since it's like 25 years after the end of the original story, Marcus Cromwell is still around, and we're definitely he will once again be the main character in the game, and Angel will reappear as well. It will be clear to the players that she in fact hit on Earth, and without giving too much details, but what she basically, one of the things that you will find in Nexus 2 is that there's right after at the end of first Nexus story, there are sort of supernatural human beings are born, like human beings with supernatural powers, and this obviously is the work of Angel. So she is on Earth, and she's working. And these people, we call them Psis, and they play a very important strategic role, at least in Nexus 2, because these supernatural beings, how do you say, they have a strategic advantage if you have them on your side. If you have one on your ship, because that's basically what they do. If you manage to get them on your side and on your ship, there's certain functionality of your ship which is unlocked, which would otherwise never be unlocked for you. So this size are good to have on your side, but obviously whoever is your enemy either wants them on their side as well, or at least want to make sure that they're in no way an advantage to you. So this is basically how the story kicks off for Nexus 2.
I want to go back momentarily to the gameplay again, and I want to talk about customization. So one of the great things in Nexus was that you could really customize your ship and fleet to your liking, incorporating certain tactics and strategies and incorporating them directly into the ship's setup. How far can we expect Nexus 2 to go? Will the ship itself start to change depending on what modules, weapons, and shields are installed?
Yes, this will be like a more technological or visual difference between Nexus 1 and Nexus 2. In Nexus 1, the ships did all look alike, no matter what how you configure them, and that's going to change for Nexus 2. Like the whole setup is, in general, it's the same, but we added one extra layer because in Nexus 1 you could target specific weapon systems or other systems and disable them. For Nexus 2, we're thinking about having modules on a ship which basically contain more elements. So there's like a module on your ship which holds a weapon system and maybe a jamming system or a radar system, and you could not only target these individual devices but the whole module, and by destroying it or disabling it, you would not only disable the weapon but also that radar and maybe whatever devices are connected to these modules. And the difference between Nexus 1 and 2 again will be that it will have that it will actually have a visual effect on the ships as well. So you could see the damage, and you could see which parts of the ship are destroyed, and even what they hold or what they held before they were destroyed.
And I'm looking at your Kickstarter site right now, and I really like the visual style of everything. I'm looking at some of the concept art, and the ships and everything look terrific. So when you're designing these ships, when you and your team are designing these ships, do you follow a certain scheme or theme that can be found in all of the ships of a certain race or nation, or is it more of a kind of let your imagination flow process?
I think it's a little bit of both, to be honest. I mean, our concept artist, he works very independent from everybody. So often he just sits down and he just starts drawing stuff, and sometimes we like it, sometimes we don't. Most of the time we do, actually, for obvious reasons, I think. But it works two ways. So we get inspiration from what he does, and also we have very specific ideas. You could tell from the races in Nexus 1 that all the different races really had their unique style of ships and appearance. And obviously it was very important to match these and to make them believable, to make them look natural for the player. So that's very much an interactive activity. Like the designers will come up with races and ideas how these races could look or should look, and on the other hand, the concept artist will draw things, and we will look at them and say like, oh, this could easily fit. So it works both ways.
Now, your game is based on the Unreal Engine, and within the comments section of your project page, there are some concerns amongst pledgers about the usage of the engine. Does the team have concerns about using this engine, and which iteration of the Unreal Engine will you be using?
Do we have concerns? Well, Nexus 1, we made on a technology that was specifically designed for that game, the Black Sun engine. At the time, we had, we wanted to do Nexus 2, and the lead programmer of Nexus 1 started to work on the technology of which you're familiar with the tech demo from that one. I read in the comments, for instance, that people think that that's pre-rendered, but it's not pre-rendered. That Nexus 2 concept prototype was not pre-rendered. So unfortunately, when Mythos went into bankruptcy, we also lost a lot of money, and we managed to keep all the people, but for instance, the technology that was developed for Nexus 2 was lost. It was not our property, and we don't know where it is, but it's probably nowhere anymore. It's maybe on a hard drive somewhere in a lawyer's office, but it's not accessible for us. So this would be the first time that we would have to start the development actually on an engine which is not our own. And obviously, you can tweak a lot on each of these engines that you can that are available for licensing today. So we're not extremely worried, because then we would not be confident about our choice. But there's worries. Again, I think it's very important that we recreate the overall atmosphere from Nexus 1. So, the visuals are very important, just as the sound and everything is really important. But to be honest, if you don't do our jobs well, then it will not be good. But I don't think it will be a problem with the technology. And look at the alternatives. There's pro and cons for each and all of them. There's different reasons why we've chosen for Unreal. Their business model is something that we can work with. Their technology is really good, and also it gives us great opportunity to make the game mod friendly, and that's an important thing for us as well. We've had great support from the mod community, in all these years, and it's important that the mod community has something to go on again with Nexus 2, and the Unreal technology makes it easy for us to create good modding tools, and so the plans that we have as far as modding is concerned are quite ambitious. Which exact version of the Unreal tech we'll be using, I guess we only know that until we basically put the signature under the licensing contract that we do.
You brought up modding, actually.
Yeah.
Do you think that Nexus 2 is going to launch with modding tools or some kind of toolkit like that?
If I remember correctly, we released the modding tools after the original release of Nexus 1. I'm not sure, but if I can remember correctly, that's what we did. Obviously we're using all sorts of tools internally to create the ships, to create the missions, to script all the missions, and obviously internally you always have somebody sitting at the next desk who made the tool. So if you have questions, you run over or you just shout, and somebody's there to help you. It's a completely different story once you start releasing those to the public, of course. So usually, the tools that you have to release or that you can release to the public must be much more polished and user friendly than what you use internally for the development of the game. So time permits, we'll put them into the package and we will release them at the same time. but obviously it makes a lot of sense, to release them in a patch or in a separate download, a few weeks after the original game. I mean, even if you want to start modding, I'm sure you want to play the original game as well. So I'm sure everybody will be looking forward to the modding tools, but I guess it will not be the first one you do when the game's out.
Well, I like this topic of community interaction and, in a way, integration. Nexus the Jupiter incident was a well-received game by the community on the whole, and the Pixel Judge team was actually quite shocked when we heard that there were difficulties in getting your name out there. It was a surprise to us to see it on Kickstarter in the first place and not backed by a major publisher. So how did this come about, and what does it mean for you all as a development team? And can you also tell us a little bit more about the challenges that you've had to face while seeking media attention?
Okay, like I said, HD used to be a publishing company, and we were a really small publisher. And again, we lost a lot of money when Mythos went into bankruptcy, because we were doing a great, a real big project with them. So HD is not really the publishing company anymore, but more like the mother company of the developer. So that would indeed mean that you would have to find a different publisher, and that is really difficult. I mean, especially if you want to work with the bigger publishers, let's say Ubisoft or Electronic Arts or Take-Two. These publishers all work with their internal studios, and if you want to present games prototypes to them, sure, they're willing to look. But if you want to sign them with them, yes, if you want them to sign a publishing deal, then it has to, the game has to be, let's say, near completion. So the time that a publisher just funded games in advance, and that basically step in at any phase of development, that's really over. So if you want to sign with a big publisher, you basically must have developed the game for 80% or something. That's the only way to sign it with a bigger publisher. And obviously that's where you need the funds as well. So there's enough interesting self-publishing models now. So it's not really an option to speak, unless you are able to to fund the 80% of the development of the game and not the last 20 or 25%. Then that's still a way to do it. But apart from that, space games, stuff like that, it's all too hardcore for the big publishers. So they're not big fans of space games at all. And it's easy to see, because there's not a lot of these games around. The games that you can find are basically self-published by most of the developers. We've had some interest from smaller publishers, but it never really worked out. So then we thought, like, okay, actually the whole idea about crowdfunding, it was something that Mike and I sort of came up with around the time that we lost a lot of money in Budapest, because we wanted to do Nexus 2. Even then, the source code and the technology was lost, and we thought, we still want to do this. And at the time, so that must have been like 2005, maybe 2006, we already came up with the idea, like, okay, what if we set up a website and we'll just ask the community to fund the development of the game. So that's interesting. Obviously, it was not, that was not a concept that was around at the time. Interesting to think what it would have, what would have happened if we would, in fact, have done it that way. But so and we're in this situation now again, or still, I should say, that we still want to make this game, and it's still on top of my list. And so this is how we came up with the idea. We know that we can make the game. We can make the game in a way that our community and our fans are going to be excited about it and happy with it once it's there. So then Kickstarter is probably the best way forward. So this is so it took quite a bit of preparations, actually, because we're based in Europe. The studio is based in Hungary, in Budapest, and HD is based in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. But in order to get your product on Kickstarter, you need to have a US company and an Amazon bank account, I believe it's called. That was a bit of a pain, but we managed to set this company up and then launch it on Kickstarter. What we did underestimate, I think, was how to get enough PR, enough attention drawn to our project. We don't have a lot of assets. It's very difficult. We don't have any game. All that we can show is the concept art that we're showing, the technology game, and of course all the content that there is from the first game. And this is the only thing that we can do, apart from interviews like this and stuff, to promote it. That is quite a challenge still.
In case you don't reach your funding goal on Kickstarter, are there any considerations among the development team to start creating another project through Kickstarter, a new IP, or would you consider Nexus 2 possibly going free to play or some kind of model like that?
Even if we would make Nexus 2 free to play, which is of course is even an interesting option, you still have to fund the development of the game. So it would still take a considerable amount of money to get it out. But should we not be able to to reach the goal of the funding? I don't know. I don't really have an answer. I mean, we have one or two backup, well, not really options, but at least ideas, and so we're not giving up yet. But we still have, I think, 12 days to go. Let's see. It's not looking too promising at the moment, I must admit. But who knows what happens? Sometimes I think it can just happen, and it gets a boost. So I don't know. I don't want to be too pessimistic, but I don't think we will give up on the idea of creating Nexus 2 anyway. And as I said, we have some ideas, which we will pursue should we not get it funded through Kickstarter. The other idea of maybe creating other original IP and promote that through Kickstarter, that's absolutely an option. I mean, we have set up the company in the US now. We have the experience of the Nexus 2 project on how it works on Kickstarter. So this is definitely something that we'll be looking at as well. Yes.
Well, I like to hear the determination. I've definitely seen a fair share of Kickstarter projects make it to the last couple of days where people finally realize, no, it's not going to happen without their help, and the funding flies through the ceiling. So I definitely hope that's the case here. So
fingers crossed.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So those were some very informative answers when it comes to Nexus 2. I want to know, you personally, what are some of your personal favorite games in the sci-fi genre, and did they inspire you with Nexus 2? What have they done for you?
Well, my interest is not in particular in sci-fi games, to be honest. If you ask me what my favorite sci-fi games are, it's hard. I mean, I've played my fair share of Homeworld, obviously, when it came out. It was a very interesting, an interesting game. But also the games I mentioned earlier, like Imperium Galactica. I played that. Master of Orion, a lot of the 4X games, even new ones. There's a new 4X game called Endless Space, for instance. I think it's French, which is a bit like Civilization, even in space, and I think it's a very interesting product. But I also like the old. I don't know if you remember them, the old Star Wars game. Like X-wing and TIE Fighter.
Oh.
Yeah,
you're speaking to the true fan here.
Oh really? Oh, those were so enjoyable. So this would be something that I would want to see again as well. The real flying and action, the way that that was produced in those games. So I don't have a very particular, I don't have one favorite space game or science fiction game. There's plenty of them. I do play a lot of games, and I had my fair share of space games as well in sci-fi games. So.
All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for taking your time out of your day to do this, and we wish you all the best with Nexus 2's funding and the development. We all
Thank
want
you
to see
very
you and your team meet success and create another great game. Anybody interested in Nexus 2 should check out their Kickstarter page. The link will be provided both below this video on YouTube and in the accompanying article on pixeljudge.com. Thanks, Vincent.
Thank you very much, Ben.